After the age of 60, many of us fall into a familiar routine of spending long stretches of time sitting indoors. In the morning, we may sit for hours with a cup of tea, flipping through the newspaper. By noon, it's back to the television, absorbed in long-running shows. And in the evening, the armchair becomes our favorite spot for scrolling through the phone or chatting online. It may seem like nothing more than a harmless habit after all. What harm could there be in sitting quietly? But the truth is, those hours of prolonged stillness are silently harming our brains day after day. In recent years, large studies have revealed that extended sitting doesn't just make the body sluggish, it directly impacts brain health. With poorer circulation, nerve cells gradually weaken, and memory declines faster compared to those who stay lightly active throughout the day. The most troubling part is that these changes don't appear overnight. They build slowly, year after year, until one day we realize we're forgetting important things and losing the sharpness we once relied on. In today's video, take a closer look at why sitting too much is considered a silent killer for the brain after 60. The serious consequences it can cause, and most importantly, the simple, natural steps we can take to change course. If keeping your mind clear and strong matters to you, stay with us until the end of this video. And as always, if you find this topic helpful, please hit like, share the video with friends your age, and subscribe so we can continue this journey of protecting our health together. Before we dive in, let me ask you something on a typical day. How many hours do you think you spend sitting? 5 hours, 8 hours? Or maybe even more? You might be surprised when you compare that number with the impact on brain health that science has uncovered. When we talk about prolonged sitting, many people immediately picture office workers glued to their desks. But in reality, after the age of 60, we're the group most likely to fall into this pattern. Retirement often means fewer obligations, more time at home, and without realizing it, hours of sitting quietly become woven into our daily routine. In the morning, many enjoy sitting with a cup of tea or coffee, reading the newspaper or scrolling through the news on a phone. It feels harmless, even relaxing. Yet when we add it up, it's not unusual to sit still for hours without standing. By midday, after lunch, the armchair becomes the perfect spot to rest and watch a few episodes of a favorite TV show. And in the evening, after dinner, many of us settle back in front of the television or scroll through social media until late at night. All told, it's easy to spend 6 to 8 hours sitting in a single day, sometimes more. A 2023 survey in the United States even showed that older adults often sit longer each day than the average office worker. The difference is that younger people usually break up their sitting with meetings, errands, or movement between tasks, while older adults tend to remain seated for long, uninterrupted stretches. That lack of breaks is what makes the harm accumulate. On the surface, activities like watching TV, reading the paper, playing cards, or scrolling online seem gentle and harmless. But it's the extended stillness that becomes a hidden danger. When muscles don't contract and release, blood flow slows. Less blood returns to the heart, and the brain receives fewer nutrients and oxygen. That's why many people notice that after a long TV session, standing up can bring dizziness, blurred vision, or a brief loss of balance. These aren't just fleeting annoyances. They're warning signals from the body. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that sitting too long often comes with mental sluggishness. For instance, after hours in front of the television, it becomes harder to concentrate on reading or solving a crossword puzzle. The mind feels stagnant, like a river with no current. These everyday experiences reflect a real biological process. Sitting too long reduces blood flow to the brain, starving nerve cells of oxygen and slowly eroding memory and focus. The worrying part is how easy it is to overlook how much time sitting takes from our day. Many people think, I'm still active, I go shopping, I do chores, but if you truly add up the hours, you might be surprised to find that sedentary time far outweighs moving time, and it's that accumulation that quietly does the damage. One U.S. study observing older adults found that those who spent most of their day in seated activities like television or phone use had nearly a 30% higher risk of cognitive decline compared to those who broke up their sitting with light movement. In other words, sitting itself is an independent risk factor for brain health, regardless of whether you exercised earlier in the day. We see this play out in everyday life. Someone who mixes sitting with light activity, standing to stretch during a TV show, or taking a short walk after reading often feels sharper, sleeps better, and forgets less. By contrast, those who sit for hours without moving tend to report more short-term memory lapses, slower reactions, and irritability. So when we talk about prolonged sitting, it's not just an office worker problem. Even in retirement, our daily habits can quietly trap us in long hours of stillness. And those seemingly harmless routines are exactly what wear down the brain over time. Now that we've identified the common sitting habits in everyday life, the next question is, what's actually happening inside the brain when we sit too long? Well, explore the first mechanism. In the next section is how prolonged sitting reduces blood flow to the brain, setting the stage for memory loss and fading clarity. Our brain is like the body's master control center, constantly burning through an enormous amount of energy every second. Although it accounts for only about 2% of our body weight, it demands nearly 20% of all circulating blood and oxygen. That supply cannot be interrupted for long. Just a few minutes of reduced circulation and you'll feel it immediately: heavy-headedness, loss of focus, even dizziness. And when we spend hours sitting still, blood flow to the brain slows, setting off a chain of subtle but lasting effects. You can picture this process with a simple garden image. Imagine a hose watering rows of plants. When the flow is steady, every flower and leaf gets nourished. But if the hose kinks, water trickles slowly, and the plants furthest away dry out and wilt. The same thing happens in our body. When we sit too long, muscles stop contracting. Blood pools in the legs. The heart struggles harder to pump it back up, and less blood makes its way to the brain. A 2024 study from the UK Biobank followed more than 14,000 older adults using wearable motion trackers. The results showed that people who spent the most time sitting had far more damage to the brain's white matter than those who stayed lightly active. White matter is the fiber optic network that keeps different regions of the brain connected. When those cables fray, information slows down, memory falters, and thinking becomes less sharp. In daily life, most of us have felt this brain fog after sitting too long. Watch a 2-hour drama without moving, then stand up, you may feel lightheaded, or your vision blurs for a moment. Or after a long morning sitting with the paper or scrolling on your phone, you may suddenly forget what you were about to do next. These small episodes are the brain's way of signaling that it has just gone through a period of oxygen and nutrient shortage. When this happens day after day, year after year, the brain weakens much like fabric that grows thin after too many washes. The tricky part is that we rarely connect these lapses to prolonged sitting. Many older adults chalk up forgetfulness or trouble focusing on just aging, but in reality, they may be the result of long sedentary stretches that restricted blood flow to the brain. Some neurologists even compare prolonged sitting to slowly tightening the faucet on brain circulation, forcing the brain to work in a constant state of shortage. And yet, reduced blood flow is only the beginning of the problem. When this pattern repeats for years, the issue goes beyond temporary fatigue. Brain cells themselves begin to suffer damage, and the process of neurodegeneration accelerates. That is the critical stage we'll examine in the next section. When we are young, the brain has a remarkable ability to repair and renew itself. If a neuron is damaged, the body quickly activates repair systems to maintain stability. But after the age of 60, this self-repair capacity weakens dramatically. If long hours of sitting become a daily habit, the reduced blood flow we discussed earlier soon develops into something more serious: neurodegeneration. Neurodegeneration means brain cells gradually lose their ability to connect and transmit signals. To picture this, imagine the brain as a sprawling city where each neuron is a tiny light bulb and the connections between them are power lines. When every line is intact, the city shines brightly and runs smoothly. But if those wires keep breaking without being repaired, one bulb after another goes dark, and the city begins to fade. Prolonged sitting speeds up this wire-cutting process. When the body is still for hours, the production of neurotrophic factors, special proteins released during physical activity, drops sharply. These molecules are like maintenance workers that keep brain circuits repaired and functional. With fewer workers on the job, small damages accumulate, networks grow fragile, and over the years, the brain edges toward degeneration. Research from the University of California found that people who sat for many hours a day had noticeably smaller hippocampi than those who moved regularly. The hippocampus, buried deep in the brain, functions like the hard drive for memory. When it shrinks, short-term memory suffers. That's why many older adults complain of forgetting what just happened while still recalling events from decades ago. We see hints of this in everyday life. Someone preparing a meal forgets which spice they meant to grab, or in mid-conversation suddenly can't recall an old acquaintance's name. These seemingly minor lapses are signs of light bulbs dimming in the brain's cityscape. The danger of neurodegeneration is that it doesn't hurt the way a sore back or stiff joints do. It advances quietly, bit by bit, until memory and thinking problems are obvious. And once neurons die, they are difficult, often impossible to restore. That's why neurologists stress prevention above treatment. Neurodegeneration affects more than memory. It can disrupt language skills, spatial orientation, and even emotional balance. Some people become more irritable, anxious, or depressed as the brain's chemistry shifts. In other words, prolonged sitting not only makes us more forgetful, but can also alter personality and reduce quality of life. We can now see the chain. Clearly sitting too long reduces blood flow, which starves neurons, leading to large-scale degeneration. And once this decline progresses, it sets the stage for an even more serious threat: Alzheimer's disease and dementia. That's the focus of the next section. Among the brain conditions older adults fear most, Alzheimer's disease and dementia top the list. These disorders don't just mean being forgetful. They gradually strip away the ability to care for oneself, disrupt family life, and create immense emotional and financial burdens. What few realize is that prolonged daily sitting can raise the risk of these diseases substantially. The brain has its own cleanup system that works hardest during sleep, clearing away waste and abnormal proteins produced by daytime activity. Two of the most dangerous are amyloid and tau. When they build up excessively, they form plaques and tangles that block communication between neurons, classic hallmarks of Alzheimer's. But when we sit for hours and blood flow slows, this cleaning system falters. Like a river running low, debris piles up along the banks. Studies show that a sedentary lifestyle, especially prolonged sitting, accelerates amyloid buildup, pushing the brain faster toward degeneration. A 2022 study published in Alzheimer's and Dementia followed more than 10,000 older adults and found that those who sat for many hours daily faced nearly a 30% higher risk of developing dementia compared to peers who stayed lightly active. This means that sitting itself, even apart from other factors, is an independent risk that speeds Alzheimer's progression. In real life, the early signs of Alzheimer's often go unnoticed. Misplacing keys, forgetting names, or repeating the same question may be brushed off as normal aging. But these may actually be warnings of weakened neural defenses caused in part by protein accumulation, and prolonged sitting may be one of the hidden contributors. Beyond memory, Alzheimer's affects many aspects of life. People lose their sense of direction, sometimes getting lost in familiar neighborhoods. Language skills decline, conversations become fragmented, and personality can shift dramatically. A once cheerful person may become irritable, anxious, or withdrawn. These changes weigh heavily not only on the individual, but also on their family. Alzheimer's and dementia are not inevitable consequences of aging. Not everyone develops them. Lifestyle, daily habits, and how we care for brain health play a decisive role. Recognizing risk factors like prolonged sitting is the first step in prevention. So, from reduced blood flow to weakened neurons to amyloid buildup, the link between sitting too much and Alzheimer's is direct and powerful. But the crucial question remains, what can we do to stop or reverse this damage? The good news is that there are natural, simple, and highly effective solutions. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next section. After exploring the darker side of prolonged sitting, many of us may feel concerned. But here's the good news. Unlike some health problems that require complex treatments, the damage from too much sitting can be reduced with very simple, inexpensive, and gentle steps perfectly suitable for those of us over 60. First, remember that the brain doesn't need intense workouts to thrive. Just by standing up and moving lightly, blood flow to the brain improves noticeably. A study in Circulation showed that getting up and walking for a few minutes after every 30 minutes of sitting can restore blood circulation to near normal levels. This means that even if we can't jog or go to the gym, small, simple movements can already make a difference. In daily life, we can weave this into our routines naturally. While watching TV, instead of sitting through 2 hours straight, we can use commercial breaks as a chance to stand, fetch a glass of water, or walk a few steps. When reading the paper or scrolling on the phone, we can pause every half hour, set it aside, stretch our arms and shoulders, or roll our neck gently. Even while chatting on the phone with friends or family, we could walk slowly around the room instead of staying seated. These little adjustments, repeated throughout the day, add up to a big benefit. To make it easier to remember, we can follow the 303 rule for every 30 minutes of sitting. Spend at least 3 minutes standing, walking, or moving. Another approach is to turn everyday chores into opportunities for activity. Gardening, grocery shopping, cooking, or light cleaning all count as beneficial movement. Instead of treating them as burdens, we can see them as moments for circulation and mental refreshment. Even something as small as standing up to pour a warm glass of water is a chance for muscles to contract and keep blood flowing. A long walk in the morning won't make up for an entire day of sitting. Our bodies need to be woken up regularly. That's why the secret lies in breaking up activity throughout the day. This is also why experts often emphasize movement is medicine, but only if taken in the right dose and regularly. Creating an environment that encourages movement can also help. If the living room armchair is too comfortable and tempts us to sit all day, we can adjust the setup, place the chair farther from the TV so we must stand to adjust the volume. Or set the coffee table at a slight distance so we need to get up to reach things. These small inconveniences are in fact clever ways to encourage activity. We've now walked through a full journey to confront what seems like a harmless habit, but deeply impacts brain health after 60, sitting too much. First, we identified the common everyday habits sitting for hours, reading, watching TV, or scrolling the phone. Next, we explained how sitting reduces blood flow to the brain, depriving neurons of nutrients. Then, we saw how it accelerates neurodegeneration, weakening neural connections. Even more concerning, we learned how prolonged sitting opens the door to Alzheimer's and dementia. And finally, we arrived at solutions: small but steady changes standing often, moving lightly, and making activity a natural part of daily life can restore healthy circulation, preserve mental clarity, and lower risk. A sharp, resilient mind isn't found in some distant remedy, but in the small choices we make every day. Each time we stand up, take a few steps, or breathe deeply, we are nourishing the brain and protecting our clarity and joy of living. If you found today's discussion helpful, please like the video, share it so friends your age can benefit too, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together in future health topics. And before we wrap up, Richard has a question for you in a typical day. How many hours do you think you spend sitting? And at what times are you most likely to stay put? Share your thoughts in the comments together. We can find smarter ways to change and encourage one another to keep habits that protect our brains.